Ben, could you just briefly explain what is Mystery City?
Mystery City, we make historical treasure hunts. We make games, they're like escape games, but outdoors across the city, using the art and architecture and the history of the cities that people are in, solving puzzles, learning stories for a fun adventure through the streets. We'll start with the meet cute. How did John and I meet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was
We
it
were
on
at
an app?
It was.
Yeah.
It was in person. It was near a bar. It was all very natural.
Yeah.
There was
I was looking for a guy that designed games, and Geert was looking for a guy to design games. It was just match made in heaven.
Yeah, we both reached for the pen at the same time. Yeah, so we were both at a conference here in the Netherlands called Up the Game, and John was there to sort of promote Bring Them Home, I believe.
Yeah.
And we were there to promote our thing, which were city games. And yeah, we were literally standing near the bar, and it had been a long day and we were quite tired, and I overheard John and Viv chatting, and I think I just turned around and said hello. Or do you remember?
So me and Viv were pretty knackered, and we'd like talk to a lot of people, but I find conferences really stressful because I'm like, I want to meet all these people, but I don't know how to make an introduction. And a lot of time in an industry that's quite small, everyone knows each other, and we didn't know anyone. So me and Viv were like, we should stay, but we're knackered. And I said, or Viv said, should we get a drink? And Ben turned around at the bar and went, I think you should get a drink. And it was like, great, we're in, let's talk.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the moment. That was actually a very like pivotal line.
Yeah. And then we were taking the ferry back from the conference place. And I think John mentioned offhand, well, if you ever want to do anything in London, let us know. And I went, letting you know. And I think we had a drink the next day, and it's been a roller coaster romance since then.
Yeah.
When was that?
2019, I would guess. April 2019.
Yeah, I think so.
The before time.
Yeah, the long ago.
Yeah. Do you want to tell the lovely folks listening about Mystery City, Ben?
Yes.
About your company.
So Mystery City was started by myself and my business partner, Emily. We started work on it in, I think, 2016, but we launched our first game in 2018. My background was as a tour guide, and so I was looking for a way to show people the city that I love without me having to walk around in the rain. That was a very important part of it. And so Emily and I, we met up at a pub quiz. And after the pub quiz, I said to her, I had an idea for some sort of treasure hunty puzzle game thing. And she said, yeah, let's do it. And I said, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out the concept. She said, no, we'll make it and then we'll figure it all out. And that's the reason anything happened, because she said go. And then we made our first game here in Amsterdam called The Mystery of a Secret Sender, which has people exploring Golden Age, 17th century, secret societies, all based on real stories. And then that went really well. So we built our second game here in Amsterdam about World War II and the diamonds and the resistance, also based on real stories. And then we were looking for world domination. And that's when John rolled into frame.
He's the man you call when you look for an aspect of world domination. You get Mr. Gracey on the phone.
I couldn't have been luckier. I'm glad he and Viv were considering a drink, and I'm glad that they finally went for it.
The cool thing for me, because the game is, sorry, you probably have questions and we're just rambling away.
No, please carry on.
The cool thing is it's like so I've played Secret Sender, and he kind of Ben walked us through the World War II one. Just didn't have time to play both, but it's the thing that excited me about it so much was it's an escape room style game in that you're solving puzzles and moving through a series of locations. But you just have the most incredible set in the world because you're using, I don't know if we've actually mentioned this, that you use the architecture of the city you're in to solve puzzles. So you might have to look up and observe the position of a gargoyle on a church and then correspond that with some documentation and then solve a puzzle, which is a made-up example. But it just means you have the most incredible scenery at your disposal that you then get to design the puzzles around. So it's, in some ways, it's quite easy to design for because you know, well, here's, let's say, Trafalgar Square. There are only a certain number of objects here that would work for a puzzle. What can we do with this? As opposed to just having a blank canvas and being like, okay, come up with 20 puzzles. Like that for me is really hard. But if I'm given a space and you have to make a puzzle based on this and this, I actually find that way easier because it limits all the agonizing and options of things that can't or may not be a good idea, and fixes it down to, well, you've got like 3 structures you need to use. Go.
Yeah.
So actually, the design process was really fun, and we spent again another very romantic couple of days walking around Soho, because Ben knew the kind of area that, like, there's a story in Soho. I don't want to spoil it because I find people either know this entire story, Robin, or they don't know anything about it. But there's a thing in Soho which corresponds to an outbreak in Victorian London. You probably know.
I know it. I've spent a lot of time in Soho. So, but for anyone who's watching at home, will not spoil the.
Won't spoil him. So we knew that was going to be where the game was going to be set, and then it was about, okay, what lovely, interesting historical locations are in the vicinity of this location in Soho, and we kind of almost reverse engineered the game from that. And it was just great. We just got to walk around central London and like look at all these cool tourist sites. And for me, I've kind of lived in the outskirts of London. I grew up in Essex. I never had really looked at the city in this way, of just like really looking and paying attention, being like, oh, Karl Marx used to live there. That's awesome. All these small things. Because when you're looking for a thing to design a puzzle around, you have to there are a couple of factors, like, is this going to be, first of all, nice to look at? Is this going to not be affected by different times of day? Like certain parks will close at like 5:30, which we then couldn't use in the game. So is it going to be evergreen? And is it a cool puzzle? Like all of these different factors. It's a really fun challenge. So I loved it.
Yeah. It's a bit like the Da Vinci Code. When you read it or watch the film and they find the statue and it's pointing towards St. Paul's Cathedral, and you're like, wow, I can't believe it points there. And you find out, well, it doesn't really, but in the book they changed it. We can't change it. We have to be like, okay, the statue's pointing somewhere. Let's find something interesting.
You can't be like, let's just rotate this statue a little bit.
I'm sure Christopher Wren won't mind. We'll just make a few adjustments to the cathedral.
How committed are you to Nelson looking that way?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you found that the constraints of the real world really sort of fueled that creativity and gave you options for puzzles rather than hampering it.
Yeah, massively. It was really inspiring to just think of like, there's one location on the route that I don't want to spoil, but it's an area of London. So my brother actually got married right around the corner. So I had been in that space, but not to this particular bit. And you step into it and it's just like, it's like if you had the most wild escape room budget in the world, you might build this. It's basically, there's loads of statues, I don't want to say too much more, that are arranged in this perfect kind of line next to each other. And it's like, I cannot think how much money I would have to spend if I wanted to make this. And it's just there. And we're just able to use it. It feels like cheating. Like, how can we get this and use it? But
so the production value is very high as a result for the set. But also in terms of the story, we get to use the greatest stories ever, which are the true stories, which I think so much is added to it when you think, wow, this all really happened. And I always say, when we run out of real history, then we'll start making stuff up. But in my experience, there's always such cool stuff out there.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of history to go around. So you might be making games for a while yet.
I hope so. And I think it's Ben. God damn it! I think Ben's tour guide experience really like allows, because I'm quite lazy. I just am like, what's a fun puzzle to do? But Ben's really good at being like, well, actually, this is a historical story that's really like interesting and wedded to this location. Let's design it around that. And he's particularly good at like weaving the puzzles back into the history. Whereas I'm really interested in the history, but as I say, I'm much more excited by puzzle design. So together, I think it's not that Ben's not interested in the puzzle design, but he's good at like particularly bringing it back to whatever it is that the game is about. Whereas I'm like, more puzzles. Whereas he's good at kind of channeling that into something that feels coherent and consistent.
Then Jon is also a very good writer and storyteller. So it gets the feedback on that side as well. And it was really fun working together. And we're always looking for the next opportunities to work together more.
Yeah, we've only known each other, for like 2 years. And I feel like I've known you for a long time. It's very cool.
Well, now that I live down south, come and do one in Exeter. There's not much of this stuff going on. Thanks. It's got a history.
There'll be loads of history there.
Yeah, loads of it. But I've done lots of games in and around London and Soho that I've relied on finding things that have been maybe inserted into drain pipes or behind bricks, and quite often the puzzles are broken because somebody's taken something that needed to be there. How have you managed to create an escape room experience on the streets without having to rely on, oh, there's a key shoved up a hole and it's gone? That sounds terrible. But
No, it sounds great.
key shoved up a hole.
So when we made our first game in Amsterdam, we had a great puzzle that involved finding a lock on the bridge where people put their love locks. Very like interactive, you're there, but then the city comes and cuts off all the locks. And then we made the policy, nothing hidden in the city, because you then have to cycle around every day and make sure everything's there. And then again, between games, because you never know if someone's done something wrong. So we don't hide anything in the city. And we found, again, that was liberating. I think when people go into designing, like we have to hide things, it becomes that crutch. But really, we just use the architecture. Instead of hiding something in a drain pipe, why not look what's in the hand of this figure on the statue? And then they have to use that. So everything you need to find, you're actually carrying in the bag with you. And you're just then from the city itself using it as your playing board and for the information you need to solve the puzzles.
Yeah, so all the bits in that. So we should say that the structure of the game is that you have a bag with lock boxes in, and each location you have a map as well, and each point on the map has a puzzle that can only be solved at that location. So you open that specific box and you solve that puzzle there, and only then do you get the combination to open the next box. So you can't do it in the wrong order. You have to physically be at the space to solve the puzzle for the box that you have, and that means that the only moving parts are in these boxes. So as Ben was saying, like the actual outside world doesn't change at all, but the way that you interact with it changes from box to box depending on what pieces you've got and what moving parts are there. And Ben is it a laser cutter? Is that what it's called? Yeah. He makes everything in his workshop in Amsterdam. I do not know how he does it. It's amazing.
I saw some of the items on the website and looking at these little puzzle boxes that you've made, and thought, oh, I want to get my hands on those. Thank you very much.
It's really
what I like to hear.
And it also means that if we need to change anything, it's really easy. You don't have to like wait 6 weeks to have it, posted over from China. It's like, oh, I'll do it this afternoon and post over. So it makes the design really nimble. We can do loads and loads of iterations and be like, oh, that puzzle's a bit confusing, or the wording isn't quite right on that, or people just are looking in the wrong direction when we want them to be looking over there. And we can make switches really easily, which means that the game can go from like functional to very smooth in quite a short space of time, which for me is super exciting because it just means you can really bash through all the not quite right versions of it and get to the good one, or the perfect one.
It's something we've learned in Amsterdam as well, is that unless you say stop at some point, you're never done iterating, because we always want it to be better. And I think everyone involved is somewhat of a perfectionist. So at some point we have to check ourselves and say, well,
yeah.
And have you ever found something's all of a sudden got in the way and you've had to rapidly adapt to it? For example, all of a sudden the council is digging up the square and doing renovations. Has that come into play at all?
That has certainly happened. The London version of that is sort of anti-vaccine protests on Trafalgar Square, which is not a crowd you want to walk deeply into, I don't think.
No, thank you.
But in Amsterdam, for example, we had a church tower. The church has been there since 1617, so fairly consistently. Big tower, golden letters on it, big clock, and everything's going fine until one day the city council decides it's time to renovate. So they put up scaffolding that doesn't go away for 2 years. It's a bit like Big Ben or Elizabeth Tower, which also suddenly we're standing there at Trafalgar Square and we're like, that would be nice, but it's just out of commission at the moment. We had another one in Amsterdam on the Rembrandt Square. They had life-size statues of all the Night Watch from the painting with lots of details, coins in his pocket, fruit in the basket, perfect. And then one day they couldn't make an agreement with the artist what to pay for the next year. And so they got rid of it. But like John said, because the games are, in a sense, modular and flexible, we're very quickly able to go in and be like, oh, okay, the tower's covered, we'll make something else. And then we build something quickly to cover it up, and then we develop an alternative that's more permanent.
Yeah, but generally we found, like, certainly in London, the only point on the tour that's had any problems is Trafalgar Square, and during the Euros as well, bits of it were covered up. But generally the puzzles are still pretty doable. And then there's also there's a phone line people can call if it's like, I can't see the thing I'm supposed to see. We're like, okay, really sorry. And that's part of the like blurb beforehand is, I'm afraid we're not powerful enough yet to stop London being closed down at certain points. So if there is a problem, we can like guide them through that particular puzzle and get them back on track. So it's not ideal, but it's never been a game-breaking experience.
Mm. It's like you on the end of the phone, John. Do we phone you up? Good, John. Stuck.
It is actually Ben. It all goes through to Ben. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we set up a few stopgaps. So there's a hint system that they can do through the website. We haven't yet needed that someone required, in London at least, a phone call. So
yeah.
That's the sign of a good game, right? That people are solving it. Is there? Are you tracking times that people are solving it? Is there sort of an average?
We not actively. I can glean that information, but we don't have it actively. It is something that we want to start tracking more because people are quite competitive, especially in the early stages of the game. We know that it's going to evolve. So, yeah.
So is the plan to wait until it's like completely locked in before we start doing times?
Yeah, although we can implement it sooner if we like. It was just, yeah, in the rush to get everything ready. It was just an unfinished part.
Yeah, but it is something people are very keen on. They like to know how good their time was and compare it to others and that kind of thing. So
yeah,
we'll put in.
Absolutely. I game with a quite competitive group of solvers and escapers, and they would want to know so that people can lord it over each other. Hold a chalkboard aloft. And go, yes, you fuckers.
Whenever we have team buildings, so we also run these with multiple groups at the same time, then we certainly keep track, because then it's really, I beat you, Pete, you're terrible.
Yeah.
But when it's just people playing with their friends as one group, I also don't want, for groups who just want to walk around and enjoy the city, I don't want them to miss out on the joy of it by running the whole way. But they're more than welcome to.
Because one of the nice things for me, because normally the things I make, as you know, Robin, are either existing IP like Werewolf that I've kind of adapted, or my own stuff. And so I'm often very, very emotionally invested in a thing. And I am with this, but it's very much Ben's idea that I've helped make one of the games for. And it just means I can be like a real geek about it, and in a way that's not tooting my own horn. I'm just like, it's really fun. And like doing the game in Amsterdam, one of my favorite parts was between puzzles, was just walking through a really beautiful part of town and having a conversation with, I played with Viv actually, one conversation with my partner. And it was just like, this is lovely. And like, it's something you don't get in escape room games, because you're like, I've got to make sure I smash this time. And I'm the same in the escape room. Like, we're not here to talk. I'm here to get the best time. Whereas it's inbuilt into this game, you have to walk around. Like, you could run, no one's going to stop you running if you really want to get a good time. But for me, the real joy of it is engaging your brain with some fun puzzles, and then just having a nice walk around a very like beautifully chosen route of just like some of the nicest sites in Soho. So you kind of get a little bit of adrenaline from the puzzles. But my favorite bit is just the like relaxing walk through a part of town. And I played it was testing it a few weeks ago. With someone we're partnered with the Crystal Maze, in terms of currently you get the game from the Crystal Maze. And Neil, who is one of the Crystal Maze directors, has worked in Soho like all his adult life. He was testing it, and I was like, he's going to know all of this. This is going to be so boring for him. And then, not boring, he loved the game, but like, he's not going to learn any facts. And then we got to one of the bit with the statues, which I'm trying really hard not to spoil. And he was like, I didn't know that was there. And I was like, yes, we got him. Like, we taught this guy who knows London inside out, particularly Soho, and it was like, again, I can't really say, it was like a statue of a famous explorer that he was very into. It was like, I had no idea that was there. And I was like, yes. So it's like, first of all, it's really nice to just wander around, but also you will learn something, even if you don't want to. We will teach.
That's sort of been my angle when I was a guide and through this as well. It's like, we're going to teach people stuff, whether they like it or not. No, they will like it. I take that back. We're going to trick them into learning some history, because I don't buy the concept, the precept that history is boring. I think it's fascinating. And so
It won't feel like it's an educational experience in the negative connotation of like, oh, I've got to sit here and learn stuff. You'll just be having a fun time, but you will next time you're in that neck of the woods be like, oh, that's where that thing is. I remember that from that game.
And for the time that we're in, that more chilled, have a wander, look at some things, solve some puzzles at your location. It sounds perfect right now. We've done all the back in the day when the door in a wall were going and you were running around quick. There's not enough time to do everything, and then you feel sad that you've created all this game, all this puzzle, and we have just because there's so much of it and there's so little time to do it. We haven't seen a quarter of the game that's on offer. But having a nice, I'm playing it next Friday evening, so having a nice walk around town. I've not been to London for a year now. Seeing the sights and maybe stopping and grabbing a bite to eat and catching up with friends. I'm so looking forward to it.
Brilliant.
The other thing I meant to say is that also makes it very like COVID friendly as well, because you are outdoors the whole time. Like as long as your group is people that you know are clean, you're just kind of, the boxes are all sanitized each game, and you're kind of outdoors the whole time, just wandering around. So it's just another nice thing, because I did do an escape room once things were opened up a month or two ago, and it was great, but I was still like, I'm still indoors with people the whole time, so it's hard to shake that, whereas this is just like there's no danger, any more danger than just being outside in the street in general. So it's a nice thing about it, which was unintentional, because we should talk about, we've talked about the vague premise of the game, but it is about an outbreak that happened in 1854 in London, and we designed this game to be released in March 2020.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. You asked before, like, what's it like making a game in this era? We made the game before this era. We didn't predict this era. We planned on launching it. No pandemics at all, but
not a one.
Plans. Yeah.
And we were planning a launch part, like an event launch party in March, and we'd kind of come up with this vague idea that there would be. This is gonna sound so tasteless now, but bear in mind this was March 2020. We thought it might be fun where there's like we decide a person at the launch party who, like maybe the 5th or 6th person to arrive, is the one who's going to be patient 0, and then we would decide a way that they wouldn't know of how they transmit it. So maybe like if they use 3 verbs in a sentence or something, like that's too specific. Maybe if they like touch someone on the shoulder, and then we're watching the whole time, we're like, right, we know they've got it as well. So now if they touch someone on the shoulder, they passed it on, but they don't know they've got it. And it was just like this fun way of like, this is a game about dealing with a pandemic, or not even a pandemic, they're dealing with an outbreak of a disease. And so we thought this will be a fun way to have a nice social game. And then all this happened, and it became vastly more tasteless.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the timing that we had to deal with.
Well, I'm glad that we've come out the other side largely, and you're able to launch this. So where can people go to find out more, get involved, maybe come and play a fun cholera themed puzzle game on the streets of London?
They can do that through our website, which is mystery.city. Should be as well mysterycity.co.uk, which may be a bit more attractive. Just checking what I had set up. Just typoing all the plans.
It's good content, Ben. While he's doing that, you can go to mystery.city/London to book your tickets. And if you are in Amsterdam, you can just go to mystery.city and you can play the 2 Amsterdam games. And we also have games in Naples and Barcelona. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
online. So what we did during the actual pandemic, we developed a couple online games that we run mostly as team buildings, also historical themed, also puzzle based, which then were also a fun opportunity because there's puzzles that work well in a city that don't work well behind the screen and vice versa. So we were able to expand our oeuvre. And one is a murder mystery detective game set in Amsterdam in the 80s, very noir. And the other one's about World War II artwork. So there's a lot of fun. And
you can find all of that at mystery.city.
Yeah. And I was just checking now that mysterycity.co.uk does send them to our London page. So
fabulous. We don't need to edit that out. But well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Best of luck with Mystery City. When did it launch, by the way?
July. That's a great
July the
question.
11th, was it? It was
July the
a
11th,
few
I
weeks
think.
ago. We did a soft launch where I
July
went
1st,
down.
rather. It was July 1st.
Yeah, I went down and like made sure, because we'd had all the boxes posted over, and I had to check there was no damage, and then I had to train the staff at Crystal Maze how to run it and everything. So we spent like a few days kind of bedding that in, and it's now good to go.
So fine folks of London, get out there while it's new and fresh, and
The weather's perilously hot.
yeah, while it's nice outside. Just be careful of flooding right now.
Yeah.
Ooh. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Ben,
Thank you.
John, best of luck with
Thank
Mystery
you.
City in London and all the other cities that you're running.
Enjoy the game.
Lovely to
And
chat.
if you have any more questions in the meantime, just let us know.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go check it out, folks, and have a lovely time going and solving some puzzles and having a walk around.
Yeah.
We'll have a review coming soon. Let's hope I like it, eh? After
Yeah, I hope so. I'm feeling pretty confident, but yeah, I really hope so.